can a child tax credit payment be reduced to offset overdue child support payments? So for individuals who received the advanced monthly payments last year between July and December, those were not reduced in any way, shape, or form to pay past due child support. And so those payments were really sort of protected from any reduction for child support. But your 2021 tax refund can be reduced to satisfy past due child support obligations. So that is important for families to know that if there are some outstanding child support commitments, when they receive their 2021 tax refund, that may include a child tax credit payment, this can be reduced to satisfy these obligations.
Missy, can I just pause for a moment? I see a question in the chat. Actually,
Yeah.
I wondered, Jen, if you'd like to pose that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my question was, is this CTC technically not considered income? So if it's not considered income, then obviously it wouldn't be taxable. So I'm pretty much trying to figure out, would this be actually taxable, or is it considered not taxable? And then my follow-up question was, do we foresee that these tax credits would be actually impacting future tax returns like unemployment, how it switched to now being taxable income for families?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That's an amazing question. Fortunately, the child tax credit that is not taxable income, and so families will not be taxed for their child tax credit, and really this will not count as income that can be weighed against, let's say, unemployment or being eligible for Medicaid, any sort of public benefit where there may be income limits. The child tax credit cannot be weighed against that, and next year at tax time, families will not be, taxed for this income.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. There have been a lot of questions around undocumented immigrants and whether or not they are eligible to receive the child tax credit. And so here, it's really important that we know that immigrant children must have Social Security numbers to be eligible for the child tax credit. Their parents do not necessarily have to have a Social Security number. As long as their parents have what is known as an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number that they can use to file their taxes. They themselves do not need to have a social, but their child unfortunately does need to have a social to claim this credit. But something we did really want to note is that even for those families you work with where the children do not have Social Security numbers, they can still receive what is known as the Empire State Child Credit, which I'll speak about in a moment, which is sort of New York State's version of a child tax credit. And so those children, although they're excluded from the federal credit, we wanted to make sure you all know that they are still very much eligible for the New York State child tax credit. And so just as a follow-up, who is excluded from receiving the federal child tax credit? And so as I mentioned, because children must have a Social Security number to claim this credit, there are an estimated 72,000 New York children who are ineligible to receive this credit. And then in addition to that, because of sort of some of those qualifying child rules that I mentioned around the length of time that you must live with a guardian, or the very specific relationship that you must have to them. We also see that there are certain children in our child welfare system whose living arrangements exclude them from receiving the credit. And so I did just want to take a minute to speak about the Empire State Child Credit. I wanted to make sure that you all know about it and sort of are able to pass the message along to the families that you work with about it. And so the Empire State Child Credit is a tax credit for New York children between the ages of 4 to 16. It is given once a year at tax time and is worth up to a maximum of $330. Now, something that's important to note is that the credit will start to phase in when family income exceeds $3,000. So that's sort of the minimum that a family must earn to be able to receive the credit. And then it will start to phase out when family income exceeds $75,000 for a single filer, $110,000 for married filers filing jointly, or $55,000 for married filers filing separately. And so as I'm sure you've already been able to sort of tell by the amount of the credit, it is much smaller than what families are eligible for with this 1-year federal CTC. But it is sort of an important reason why we want to be encouraging our families to file taxes, because we all know that any little bit helps, and that getting this credit, especially with the sort of rising cost of living and of raising children, can be very helpful. And so to receive the Empire State Child Credit as well, our families must file their taxes. And who is excluded from receiving the Empire State Child Credit? Unfortunately, our state excludes our youngest kids from receiving the Empire State Child Credit. So children under 4 and 17-year-olds are not eligible for it. In addition to that, families with incomes under $3,000 are excluded from receiving the credit. It is not fully refundable in the way that the expanded federal child tax credit is. But again, there is no requirement for this credit tied to children having a Social Security number. So that is one of the important benefits of the Empire State Credit. And then those were sort of all of the FAQs that I had highlighted. We do have some resources here that I just wanted to flag for you all. But before I do that, are there any sort of questions about any of those FAQs, or really about anything that anyone would like to ask?
Hi, Missy. Quick question. How can someone check to see if they have funds available? Like maybe they filed their tax return, but they're not sure if they received all of their benefit, or they may have a split household, or, just to see if it's been claimed by a partner or a child's caregiver.
Yeah, that's a great question. There is an IRS portal, an IRS update portal, that the one that I mentioned that folks can use, that could have used last year to update like a big life event or the birth of a child. And I believe that you were last year able to check on that there. I want to say that depending on sort of what happens when you file your taxes and what type of a refund that you receive, that you are able to check on that directly from your tax refund.
And Missy, thank you so much for this information. It's so helpful. I'm curious for a family that may qualify for the Empire State Child Credit, who has potentially already filed their taxes for the year, if they may be, how they may be able to receive those funds, if possible at all.
Yeah, so the Empire State Child Credit, that should come automatically. There's really no extra work that a family needs to do when they're filing their taxes, the state portion of their tax return. That should really, be very automatic when you're listing dependents and their ages, sort of all the questions that are asked during filing taxes. That Empire State Child Credit really should be an automatic part of the refund.